Many people spend years trying to change their lives by changing their thinking. They read books, attend seminars, practice affirmations, develop new insights. They learn new philosophies, new frameworks, new ways of understanding themselves and the world. And for a moment, it often feels like something has shifted. The insight is clear. The understanding makes sense. The old pattern is finally visible. Yet somehow the same patterns keep returning. The same fears, the same hesitations, the same reactions. The same moments where life moves closer and something inside contracts. Opportunities arrive and doubt appears. Relationships deepen and withdrawal follows. Expansion becomes possible and resistance quietly returns. Eventually, a difficult question begins to surface. If I understand this so clearly, why do I still respond this way? Why does fear remain when I know better? Why do old patterns persist when I can see through them? Why doesn't understanding automatically create change? The answer may be simpler and more profound than most people realize. Because beliefs are not primarily thoughts, and what was not created by thought rarely dissolves through thought alone. Most people assume that understanding should create transformation. The logic seems obvious. If you understand your fear, it should disappear. If you understand your limitation, it should dissolve. If you understand your conditioning, you should be free of it. After all, once something is seen clearly, what reason could there be for it to remain? Yet lived experience rarely works this way. A person can understand that success is safe and still feel anxiety when visibility increases. They can understand that love is possible and still withdraw when intimacy deepens. They can understand that abundance is available and still tighten around money, opportunity, or support. The insight is real. The understanding is genuine, yet the reaction remains. This creates one of the most frustrating experiences on any developmental path. You know something has changed in your understanding, but your behavior does not seem to have caught up. You recognize the pattern while it is happening, you can explain it, you can describe where it came from, you may even know exactly what needs to happen next, and yet the old response still appears. Eventually, many people begin turning this frustration against themselves. They assume they lack discipline. They assume they are not committed enough, not consistent enough, not motivated enough. Some conclude that they are sabotaging themselves. Others wonder why years of personal growth have not produced the freedom they expected. But what if the problem is not a lack of understanding? What if the issue is not that you have failed to learn the lesson? What if the reason the pattern remains is because it was never created by thought in the first place? If that is true, then no amount of thinking will be enough to make it disappear. And that changes the conversation entirely. The reason insight often fails to create immediate change is that most beliefs do not exist primarily as thoughts. They exist as predictions. The mind tends to treat beliefs as ideas, opinions, conclusions, stories we tell ourselves about life. But the beliefs that shape behavior operate at a much deeper level. The nervous system is constantly making predictions about reality. What is safe? What is dangerous? What can be tolerated? What might overwhelm me? What can I approach? What should I avoid? These predictions are not primarily intellectual, they are physiological. They are embedded in the body's expectations long before they become conscious thoughts. Long before a belief becomes a sentence in the mind, it has already become a pattern in the body. It appears in muscular tension, in hesitation, in vigilance, in withdrawal, in urgency. In the subtle ways, the nervous system organizes itself around what it expects life to be. This is why beliefs often survive intellectual understanding. You may consciously understand that something is no longer true. You may see clearly that a fear is outdated. You may recognize that a limitation was inherited from the past. And yet the reaction remains, not because the system is refusing to learn, but because it is operating from a different level of intelligence. The nervous system is not asking, is this belief true? It is asking, has reality demonstrated that something different is safe? That is a very different question. The mind seeks explanations. The nervous system seeks evidence. The mind wants certainty. The nervous system wants survivability. And until the system experiences enough evidence that a new possibility can be safely lived, the old prediction often remains in place. This is why positive thinking frequently feels insufficient. This is why affirmations often fail to produce lasting change. And this is why understanding alone rarely transforms behavior. Because the body organizes around survival, not philosophy, not self-improvement, not positive thinking, survival. And until we understand this, we will continue trying to solve a physiological process with intellectual tools alone. Understanding that beliefs operate as nervous system predictions helps explain something that frustrates almost everyone on a path of growth and transformation. Insight is valuable, insight matters, but insight is informational. The nervous system updates through evidence. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. A person can realize, I am worthy, yet still feel uncomfortable receiving appreciation, recognition, or support. A person can realize, I am safe, yet still feel tension when life begins asking more of them. A person can realize, I deserve success, yet still hesitate when opportunity appears. Not because the insight is false, not because they are resisting change, and not because they secretly want to stay stuck. The reaction remains because the body has not yet experienced enough evidence to reorganize around the new understanding. From the perspective of the mind, the insight may be obvious. The conclusion has been reached. The old story has been exposed. The new perspective makes sense. But from the perspective of the nervous system, the situation is still unresolved. The system is asking, can I actually live this? Can I remain present here? Can I survive what this new possibility requires? Can I stay intact if this becomes real? These questions cannot be answered through explanation alone. They can only be answered through experience. This is why insight often arrives during moments of reflection, while reading, meditating, having a conversation, listening to a podcast, sitting quietly with a new understanding. In those moments, the system is relatively regulated. The body feels safe enough to see something clearly. But later, when life presents a situation that resembles an old fear, an old wound, or a previous threshold, the nervous system automatically returns to the prediction it already trusts. Not because the insight disappeared, but because the insight has not yet become embodied. The system still relies on what experience has taught it, and experience carries more authority than explanation. The nervous system trusts lived reality more than intellectual certainty. It trusts what has been survived more than what has been understood. This is why so many people feel trapped between what they know and how they live. They know more than they can currently embody. They understand more than their nervous system can yet sustain. And what often feels like failure is actually something much more ordinary. The body is waiting for evidence. Not arguments, not reassurance, not more insight, evidence. Evidence that what was once predicted as dangerous can now be safely lived. Only then does the prediction begin to change, and only then does the belief begin to loosen. Once people realize that insight alone is not creating change, a predictable response often appears. They try harder, they think harder, they analyze more deeply, they argue with themselves. The mind begins searching for the missing piece that will finally unlock the pattern. If fear appears, it tries to reason with the fear. If hesitation appears, it tries to explain why hesitation is unnecessary. If an old reaction returns, it immediately begins correcting it. At first, this feels responsible. It feels like self-awareness. It feels like growth. But much of the time, this internal argument strengthens the very pattern it is attempting to remove. Because by the time the argument begins, the nervous system has already organized around protection. The body has already predicted danger. Muscles have tightened. Attention has narrowed. The system has begun preparing for a threat it believes may be present. Only afterward does the mind arrive and begin negotiating. It starts presenting evidence, counter-arguments, new perspectives, positive interpretations. But the body is already responding to a prediction that is in motion. The mind is attempting to debate a process that was never created by logic in the first place. This creates an exhausting cycle. Reaction, analysis, correction, reaction again. A feeling appears. The mind explains it. The feeling remains. The mind explains harder. The cycle repeats. Many people spend years trapped inside this loop, not because they lack understanding, but because they have mistaken explanation for evidence. They assume that if they can just find the right insight, the right perspective, or the right argument, the reaction will disappear. Yet the nervous system is not waiting for a better explanation, it is waiting for a different experience. This is why internal debate so rarely produces lasting freedom. The system does not update because it has been persuaded. It updates because reality has demonstrated something new. A person does not stop fearing water because they understand swimming. They stop fearing water because they enter it, remain present, and discover through experience that they can stay afloat. The same principle applies here. The issue is not lack of understanding. The issue is that the nervous system still predicts threat, and no amount of internal debate can substitute for lived evidence. The body is not asking to be convinced, it is asking to discover, and that discovery can only happen through contact with reality itself. If beliefs do not change through thought alone, then a different orientation becomes necessary. A somatic orientation, an orientation rooted not in convincing the mind, but in allowing the nervous system to learn. Because beliefs change when experience changes, not dramatically, not through force, not through overpowering fear or replacing old thoughts with new ones, but through repeated contact with reality. The nervous system learns through experience, one encounter at a time, one moment of contact at a time, one lived experience that gently contradicts an old prediction. Over time, the system begins to discover something new. I can stay here. I can survive this. I can remain present. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt threatening becomes familiar. What once required protection no longer requires the same degree of defense. This process is often slower than the mind would prefer. The mind wants immediate resolution, immediate certainty, immediate freedom. But the nervous system moves differently. It updates through experience, through contact, through surviving what once felt threatening, through remaining present where it once needed to withdraw, through discovering again and again that reality is not responding in the way the old prediction expected. This is why transformation often looks less dramatic than people imagine. It is rarely a single breakthrough, rarely a single realization, rarely a single moment where everything changes forever. More often, it is a gradual accumulation of evidence. Evidence that visibility is survivable. Evidence that intimacy is survivable. Evidence that success is survivable. Evidence that uncertainty is survivable. Each experience teaches the system something that no explanation ever could. And slowly, almost quietly, the prediction begins to change. The body no longer prepares for the same threat. The old contraction appears less often. The old hesitation carries less authority. The old belief begins to loosen, not because it was defeated, not because it was argued with, but because it is no longer needed. The system has learned something more accurate, and when the prediction changes, the belief changes naturally. What once felt impossible becomes available. Not because you convinced yourself, but because you experienced something different and remained present long enough for the body to believe it. This is the deeper invitation of transformation, not to think differently about reality, but to stay in contact with reality long enough for reality itself to teach you something new. Perhaps the problem is not that you lack insight. Perhaps the problem is not that you have failed to understand. And perhaps the problem is not that you need one more technique, one more strategy, or one more breakthrough. Perhaps the problem is that you have been expecting insight to do work it was never designed to do. Insight has value. It can illuminate what was hidden. It can reveal patterns that were previously unconscious. It can help you recognize what is happening while it is happening. But insight is not transformation. Insight points, the body learns, and the body learns differently than the mind. It learns through contact, through experience, through evidence, not through argument, not through pressure, not through trying harder to convince yourself, not through correcting every reaction that appears, but through discovering, one experience at a time, that what once felt threatening can now be safely lived, that what once required protection no longer requires the same response, that what was once predicted as danger is no longer experienced that way. Over time, the system reorganizes, not because it was forced, but because reality demonstrated something new. And when reality demonstrates something new often enough, the prediction changes. When the prediction changes, the belief changes. And when the belief changes, behavior begins to change naturally. Without force, without self-conflict, without the exhausting effort of trying to become someone different. Because beliefs do not yield to thought, they yield to reality. And the more willing you are to remain in contact with reality, the more life itself becomes the teacher. Not through explanation, but through experience, not through certainty, but through contact, and not through control, but through the quiet discovery that reality is often far safer, wider, and more supportive than the old prediction ever allowed you to see.